Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of All Access. You'll be pleased to notice that I got rid of that stupid-looking goatee, and I got a lot of abuse for it at work and elsewhere. So anyhow, we're back to normal, and I want to dive in, and there's a lot to discuss, as always. And some of the hard-hitting questions that came up recently are really interesting. And I want to go directly into what I think is one of the primary issues that are facing us as we go into a new era where we're going to have to slowly transition away from selling hopes and dreams to actually delivering results. And as that happens, like in the old days, I don't know, 5 years ago, you could promise things. You could always say, in 3 years, I'm going to come up with something new. And even though all I've got today are just a bunch of useless coins, in 3 years, we're going to have a glorious thing. Godot will arrive someday, and it's going to be glorious. And there are many chains that did this. And but by now it's been 13 years or so since the initial Bitcoin paper, and it's about time that this area delivered results. There is demand. We've sold the dream. There are people who are at the gates. They demand a working blockchain solution. And you can't just keep them up, just you can't string them along forever. So at some point you have to be able to deliver, and that point is reached. It's upon us. And if you can't deliver, then you're going to be in this one big unified category of people who are constantly pushing the dreams into the future. And there are chains like this. I'm not going to name them. And there are chains that never ever delivered. And I don't think it's good for us as an area, for us as a space, to have many of these projects. Now, when you do have a space like ours, where 95% of the money in it is speculative, and only 5% really is in command of the technical details, you get into funny situations. The 95% easily gets spooked. The 95% looks to certain thought leaders for guidance. And just based on very small things, that money can just slosh around in the system. And another thing that can happen is that money just sloshes around in the system for no reason at all. It's just picking up noise, amplifying noise. So these things are all happening. But the time is slowly upon us when people have to deliver. And when that delivery date comes, when the time is nigh, right? So then we're going to see whose narratives have held up and whose narratives are based on empty dogma, unsubstantiated beliefs, unscientific beliefs. So I want to talk a little bit about this, especially when it relates to consensus. So it started out with Kevin saying something that I think is fairly innocuous. And he's pointing out that L2s make exactly the same security assumptions as the underlying L1s. So this is not this should not have been a controversial statement. So he says L2s are secure because they settled on an L1. That's the statement that many people make. I actually don't believe this is a good frame. L2s are not just secure because they settle on an L1. L2s make a bunch of security assumptions other than the security assumptions of the L1 they settle on. So I want to go back to this at some future podcast and discuss in detail what exactly I mean. But let me give you a glimpse of why this is a bad statement and why you should not get tripped up by it. So it is true that L2s are using the security of L1, but they also introduce their own security assumptions. Many L2s today rely on a sequencer for liveness. They rely on a whole bunch of validators of their own for safety and liveness. They rely on the availability of data. And none of the L2s I know actually provide a fairness guarantee. But if they were to try to do that, then they would have to introduce additional assumptions into the system that they've built. So there's a lot that they do. But Kevin is just picking up one little aspect of this and saying, look, these guys, they rely on L1s. L1s are secure because they have certain assumptions. And one of the assumptions is market incentives will guarantee majority correctness. And therefore, L2s make the exact same assumption. This is straight up logic. Okay, it's just if X uses Y, then and y depends on z, then x depends on z. That's all he's saying. It's very, very simple stuff. There's nothing, I don't think you can really pick a bone with this. But Suzuha ended up getting upset at this, and she's pointing out that L1s do not assume majority correctness, is the claim. A full node rejects invalid state transitions signed by the majority. Why won't this cursed meme die? Well, I'll tell you why that's not a meme and why it won't die. Okay, so she is sadly committing a very common error, which is when people talk about security of blockchains, they typically conflate various different properties required for the secure usage of that chain. What are these properties? You have nobody on earth will contest the following two things I'm going to say, but there is more I will add. For a blockchain to be secure, it has to have safety guarantees and liveness guarantees. If you're not live, so let me just actually describe what these mean. Safety means that there are no invalid state transitions. So the chain doesn't suddenly, for example, reward me with $1 billion worth of AVAX or whatnot. That would be an unsafe transition. And there ought to be some mechanism that ensures that that does not happen, right? So Bitcoin, for example, should not suddenly reward some random person with a gazillion Bitcoin. It's just, you shouldn't be able to create Bitcoins out of the thin air. There should be a limit of at most 21 million coin, et cetera, et cetera. There are a whole bunch of smaller safety properties that I'm going to call just the set of valid transitions. The chain should never make an invalid state transition. Those are known as safety properties. In addition to these, the chain must always make progress. Those are known, this is known as a liveness property. If you don't have liveness, you have a chain known as you know what. I'm not going to name names, but you know the chains that halt on a routine basis. A year and a half ago, we had one halt in Avalanche. And it wasn't a real halt, actually. It's one of our three chains ended up having a problem and coming to a halt, but the other two chains were working fine. So that event took many years off the end of my life. I felt terrible, but somehow other chains are dealing with this on a monthly basis, and it's somehow accepted. And the money is in that, the 95% speculative money ends up going to those chains, regardless of the fact that it's been multiple years and they can't achieve that liveness property. But to me, the liveness property is absolutely essential. To you, it ought to also be absolutely essential. Nobody wants to put their funds into a coin where the funds cannot be moved because the chain has just stopped producing blocks. So these two are absolutely essential properties. There are other properties that you want as well. One of them is fairness, right? You don't want to use a chain where all of the MEV opportunities reside with Vitalik. I wouldn't want to use that chain. That would be terrible. I don't want to use a chain where all of the MEV opportunities reside with a friend of Vitalik's. Okay, so I don't want to use an L2 where there's a singular entity that has all the MEV opportunities. These are all fairness properties. I would, in fact, if somebody does invent a system like that, whoop-dee, you just invented the system as we know it. You reinvented Wall Street with a hell of a lot more steps, a hell of a lot more complications. So there's absolutely no value whatsoever in a system that is not fair. I'm going to leave fairness concerns aside. There are many other concerns and properties that distributed systems people don't pay that much attention to, actually, and they should. Blockchain people pay attention to it, and there's a little bit of a gap in between the two. But I will go back to the safety and liveness properties that are at the heart of this discussion. So Suzuha here, she is concerned solely with safety. And she's saying a full node rejects invalid state transitions signed by the majority. Yes, that gives you safety properties. She is right on that front. But there is far more to security than just safety. You want safety, liveness, fairness, and a whole bunch of other things. So let me say that again. Safety, liveness, fairness, DDoS protection, and a whole bunch of other properties that are absolutely essential for a good blockchain to be usable. So she's right only for the safety side. She's ignoring these other things that are absolutely essential. So Why won't this cursed meme die? It won't die because you're incorrect. The L1s do assume majority correctness. Satoshi's white paper in very, very, very stark terms says that he assumes that it's majority correct. Satoshi's writings on the topic expand on this, and he says that obviously that the miners, the majority of the nodes and miners in the system have to be majority correct for the system to continue operating and producing blocks. So I do want to make a couple of points. So she's right about the importance of the full nodes. Full nodes are absolutely essential. And what they do is they provide a second layer of defense against invalid state transitions. There's the set of nodes that comprise the system that generate blocks. For Bitcoin, this is a very small number of nodes. It's about 24 nodes. It's about 24 nodes that control the mining pools. And those nodes will end up creating all of the blocks on the Bitcoin chain. For Avalanche, this is 1,400 nodes, and they end up being actual block producers in the system. And they are consulted on the creation of every single block. And those nodes, in the case of Bitcoin, those 24 nodes are responsible for both safety and liveness. In the case of Avalanche, it's 1,400 nodes that all together create the safe and live chain. Okay, and when it comes to safety, it doesn't hurt at all. In fact, it's wonderful that in addition to those nodes that actively produce blocks, there exist these other nodes that in Bitcoin parlance are called full nodes that see the blocks that are produced by the block producers and check them and reject them for invalid state transitions. This gives us an extra layer that checks safety, but they only guarantee safety. They don't give us that liveness guarantee that we want, and certainly don't give us that fairness, et cetera, that we additionally want as well. So I hope that's clarifying. I hope you all kind of got a sense for why this is scientifically incorrect. There's much more to a secure system than safety. I've been saying stuff like this for a long time. I don't know what happened to that Twitter discussion. So there was an assertion made by somebody there that, hey, Avalanche doesn't pay attention to this. No, Avalanche loves full nodes. And I was the very first person a long time ago when the Bitcoin block size wars were being waged. I was the one that was saying, look, miners cannot just arbitrarily change the rules. What she said here is correct. There are full nodes that will reject invalid state transitions. I kept getting pushback on this. You can look up my blog post, hackingdistributed.com, look up voting power, Bitcoin voting power on hackingdistributed.com. You will find posts going back to at least 2016, probably 2014. So 8 years ago, I was one of the first people to point out that full nodes are absolutely essential. I had academics writing blog posts that were blatantly incorrect, saying that if the miners collude, they can change the rules by which the Bitcoin blockchain is produced. I had a whole bunch of developers working on Bitcoin at the time, contesting what I said, saying, hey, the miners, if we had enough of miners actually agreeing to a change, we could change the rules for the entire game. That, I said very, very defiantly and very strongly, is incorrect. What Suzuha said is right, that these full nodes do reject invalid state transitions. You should be running them. They provide a second layer of defense against all sorts of invalid operations that might get snuck up on the chain by a colluding majority of block producers. And that my blog post from 2014 and later amended with other stuff ended up becoming the fodder for the UASF movement, the user-activated soft fork, which was essentially an effort to refuse and reject blocks produced by miners that users did not want to use. So in some ways, or in many ways, I was one of the intellectual foundational pieces of the UASF movement. So what she said here, I fully agree with, but only insofar as it affects safety and not as it affects security overall. The first statement I disagree with, that is incorrect. They do assume majority correctness because they have to provide not just safety, but liveness and fairness and all these other things. So that's what was going on here. And then, of course, the discussion shifted. So I hope everybody understands that that there's much more to blockchains than, as I said, safety, liveness, fairness, DDoS protection, and a bunch of other properties are very much essential to blockchains. But this discussion ended up going, and getting a bit more extensive, with Corey coming in, and he brought up the issue of slashing. So what is slashing? Slashing is the following thing. In some chains, ETH2 being one of them, and Cosmos being another, if a node ends up doing something that the rest of the network perceives as undesirable, that node is punished. And that node is punished by taking away a piece of the principal it took, a piece of the stake it staked to participate in the system. So this is different from Avalanche. In Avalanche, if you are staking some AVAX, then you become part of the system, you become a block producer, and if you misbehave, then your rewards are going to be taken away from you, but your original principal will never be taken away from you. Okay, so why is it that way? So I think Corey ended up saying something like, it's such a large design space, why are you not taking advantage of slashing? So that's the essential question. It's a good question. So I'll tell you why, and I'll try to give you more of this this space. So I think Kevin ended up responding to this and saying, why is the stick necessary? So there is a carrot and a stick. The rewards are the carrot. And if you believe that the incentives that are present for people to achieve the reward are good, that you've set up a proper game theoretic system where people, to get the carrot, will do the things you need them to do, then why are you introducing the stick? Because the stick, if it's not necessary, should A, not be built at all. It takes time to build. And B, much more importantly, it's actually incredibly dangerous to build that stick in. And this is going to illustrate one of the key differences between the philosophy behind Ethereum and Ethereum 2 versus Avalanche. This is a meta-level difference. So this is the kind of difference that will remain no matter what happens to the technology. Ethereum 2 has shifted drastically over the years. I first was exposed to it in 2015 or so. And in now 7 years, it went through, was going to use VRF, then it was going to use VDFs, verifiable random functions, verifiable delay functions. There was going to be some kind of I think there was a year that the Ethereum Foundation spent on thinking about how to create a competition for people to build different VDF solution machines, specialized hardware for VDF, solving VDFs, verifiable delay functions. Then it was going to be, it just took a whole bunch of iterations to come to where it is today. It's quite different from how it started. So, despite the changes, the approach to system design hasn't changed at all. And on this slide, I think you can see it. You see Kevin saying, look, it's not necessary. We're minimalistic. We have a minimalistic approach to design. We build only that which is scientifically necessary. That's one of the key abilities that we have. It's one of the key things that have enabled us to actually deliver. So in contrast, you can talk and talk and talk. You get a whole army of people who talk and talk and talk and attack you and so forth. But at the end of the day, you should, we believe that you should deliver things. And we have a good, strong history of having delivered everything that we promised to deliver. So Vitalik is pointing out something, and he's right as well. He says the level of economic security is much higher when attackers can lose not just potential gains, but also their principal. He is right. So why is the stick necessary? He's not answering that question. He's not saying it's necessary because of this. He's saying, well, look, there's a fact here, and he is right, that there is more economic security to be had when attackers can lose not just potential gains, but also their principal. So I agree with this, and we're not fundamentally against slashing. If slashing turns out to be a good idea, I will add it to the code myself the next day. Okay, it's fairly easy to do, but we don't intend to do it. And the reason is this: the risk of losing the principal, the user's principal, is too large. Okay? At the end of the day, you are looking at potentially building two systems. One in which there are rewards that people lose, but nevertheless, they can sleep very well at night, knowing that at the end of a staking period, they will always have their principal back. Or you can build a system, and suppose, for the former system, it takes, X amount of dollars. I'm just making up numbers. Suppose it takes, $20 billion to attack the first system. Okay, and suppose. Let's just suppose that's the case. And to cause 20 B, you end up causing some kind of a crash for the system. System turns into one of these crash systems. I think on any given day, there are a couple of these, but suppose we Solana for a couple of days. That's what we're dealing with for some period of time. And then compare that to another system that you can build where you have not only the ability to take away rewards, but you also take away people's principles. Okay, now let's think about that world. Now that second system, as Vitalik points out, the amount of money required to attack it would be larger. So if the first one is 20, let's say the second one takes $100 billion to attack. Okay, so now the question is, which one is a better system to build? Which one is more desirable? So the issue here is, or one of the big considerations that one needs to take into account is, well, what is the risk of building the second system? Okay, so what is the possibility? What is the probability of attack at the 20 B mark? And how does that probability diminish as you go to the 100 B mark? And I gave him a very, very generous 5x improvement in terms of, I'm making these numbers up. I don't think anybody has done any science whatsoever on any of this. It's all system designed by gut feel. And I'm trying to be as charitable to the opposing argument as possible. The problem here is any mechanism that you design for slashing is likely to run into issues when there is a software bug. So Ethereum 2 is going to end up having, for example, many different clients. If there's a bug in any of those clients, any kind of a software bug whatsoever, if there's a misconfigurable entry that causes people to misconfigure their systems and lose their coins, then that will happen. We know from distributed systems that if it's possible, it will ultimately happen. So when that happens, those people lose a portion of their principal. So people who end up staking in a slashing system, they face a very real threat of actually losing money. Now compare that to the former case where there's really no risk to your initial principal. I sleep pretty well at night knowing that my AVAX that are staked are fine. They're just going to be okay. And I just kind of looked at the macro conditions, staked mine, and said, hey, I don't need all these coins for some period of time. I'm not going to touch it. And I have essentially zero, I shouldn't talk too big, but, I could always get hacked, et cetera, et cetera. But there is no slashing risk to the coins that I'm using for staking. And my keys are obviously not online, et cetera. Now compare that to Ethereum 2 or any other system with slashing. They actually have very much a daily risk. Every day you wake up, you have to worry about, hey, is my node doing the right things? If my node, for any reason, has any kind of a bug, or God forbid, a hardware failure, then I'm going to lose my coins. I'm going to lose my principal. So this is really, really problematic. And it's up to you to decide which one you find more desirable. But so there are two things that are clear to me. One, the risk of losing one's principal and causing other people to lose their principal is so high, given what I know about software, that the benefit of raising the attack threshold from 20 to 100 by 5x, whatever, is just immaterial. Somebody who could have attacked with 20 could easily have raised just 5x more money and have attacked with 100. Okay, so it's once the threshold is above a certain level, and I would put that level at about 100 million or so. Once the attack threshold is above that level, then the set of people who can attack you are so small that they probably have access to the outer range anyway. So the reduction that you're getting is probably following a log function or something of that kind. So that's incredibly small improvements for a very small benefit. And so that's where we stand. And you're already seeing a big difference in how we design things. We're minimalistic, we're science-driven. Second thing that I will say, of course, is the entire scientific issue here has been underexplored. And in Avalanche, we don't build things unless we have a scientific foundation. So there are other design approaches where you say, hey, I'm going to throw everything into the kitchen sink. I think this is a concern. I think that is a concern, especially when you have committees, especially when you have large numbers of people involved in discussions. You end up having to worry about everything under the sky. You end up having to have a solution for each and everything, no matter how unlikely it might be. And I've been in meetings where someone was worried about the possibility of a hash collision, 256 bits of a hash collision. And you sit there and you wonder, look, it's just, if you're going to worry about that, that the output of SHA-256 is going to collide with the output of another SHA-256, item, then you should really worry about a different scenario where even as I speak, all of these oxygen and nitrogen atoms are colliding with each other, and the nitrogen is coming my way and all the oxygen is going over that way, and then I suffocate here while you guys are able to breathe over there. Maybe you spontaneously combust from the oxygen. So there are things that are so unlikely, and there are benefits that are so small that, one could worry about them, but we don't. Okay, there are many other things that I should worry about before I worry about that. The likelihood of a hardware failure, far higher. The likelihood of a software bug, guaranteed. I assure you there will be a software bug. Some chain will have it. All chains have software bugs. So if that will cause you to lose your principal, then you're in a world of hurt. And I think it's bad design. So what's the impact of this bad design? Well, it takes us a little bit of time to go back and forth to try to convince people that, hey, you're doing the wrong thing. It's just maybe you should rethink your assumptions and your style, et cetera, et cetera. But more importantly, the other thing to worry about here has to do with the impact of potential software bugs and slashing. And what is that impact? The moment that somebody has to go to sleep worrying about whether or not their node is operating correctly is the moment when that person is going to say, look, I'm not equipped to do this. I mean, you most likely, if you're listening to me, or whoever you might be, you're probably not equipped. I'm not equipped. And I have like sysadmins helping me. So it's actually very, very difficult to run something perfectly, to ensure that the code is perfect, hardware is perfect, and it's operating perfectly day to day to day. So what's going to happen to you? Well, you're going to have all your users centralize their nodes. You're going to have professional node operators take over this risk and manage it for other people. And is that what's happening in Ethereum too? Absolutely. That's absolutely what ended up happening. Everything in distributed systems is a trade-off. And with this set of assumptions, what ends up happening is you end up with professional node operators. I think one of them, I forget the name of it, is almost at 33%. I think they're at 32.2% of the stake. So you've got a decentralized system. It hasn't been born yet, but it's already fairly centralized. You've got a centralized system, and it hasn't even been launched yet. So it's a terrible design choice that has all these cascade effects. And if I were actually staking ETH2, I too would go to a node provider. Why the heck would I ever bear that risk? I know I cannot keep my hardware up day after day. I know I don't have a whole bunch of things that I need to have. I don't have redundant machines, et cetera, et cetera. In the case of Avalanche, I just take that risk. And if it so happens and my node is down long, my nodes are down long enough, I will lose rewards. That's okay. I deserve to lose them. I tried to participate in the system and couldn't, and that's just what happens to me. That's okay. But losing my principal is incredibly risky. So I posit to you that I think Avalanche has done by far the better design choices with by far the better outcomes when it comes to decentralization and hedging of this the software bug risk and hardware failure risk. So that's sort of the discussion from yesterday, and there's a lot more to say. There was a lot of misunderstandings and so forth on every side of the aisle. So crypto Twitter in a bear market is a miserable place, and people talk about all sorts of funny things and misunderstand each other or talk at each other instead of with each other. So, but I do think we're getting to the bottom of it. One thing to keep in mind is that when system architects like Kevin or myself are talking about systems, we typically talk about the nodes that provide the properties to that system, the block producers. So unless I make it clear what the context is, that's typically the set of nodes that I'm primarily concerned about. The safety, liveness, fairness, et cetera, all stem from those nodes. Now, there are other nodes, like full nodes, et cetera, that are important. We typically don't mention them because they are part of a layered security approach. And we have many other layers to security, all the way down to what I do on the phone or what the user does on their phone, what the user does on her laptop, etc. So we won't be able to fit that in a tweet. We won't be able to give the full context. So there's going to be some assumptions, some mismatched assumptions. So when lay people talk about these things, they typically look at it from a client-centric perspective. When system architects talk about it, they talk about it from a server perspective or a node block producer perspective. So there will be some mismatch due to culture. And as I said, there's going to be a whole lot of discussion. I do want to say one final thing. There's going to be a lot of people making noise on crypto Twitter in a bear market. A lot of them. Everyone on crypto Twitter, by definition, is making noise about crypto in a bear market. And one of the most important things to try to pay attention to is the signal from the noise. There are people out there who have delivered. Kevin's one of them. And when he says, these are the assumptions, those are the assumptions. Can he make a mistake? Sure. And then if you point it out nicely, he'll cop up to his mistakes, absolutely guaranteed. So these are not of the same caliber as all these other people who are making noise, right? There are many other people who haven't delivered anything whatsoever. I mean, they might have many followers, but the people with a track record of delivery are very, very different. So do pay attention to who you pay attention to. Anyhow, so on the topic of Avalanche, subnets, blockchains, etc., you are of course familiar with the fact that Avalanche supports multiple subnets. It gives people an easy way to launch a subnet to create their own chain. So to make this even faster, easier, better, we introduced a new command line interface. So Connor just announced this recently. It's just an all-in-one tool. Just from the command line, you can launch validators and build a subnet on Avalanche. And the bottom line is we're able to launch a blockchain faster than most networks finalize transactions. So let's see. I think roughly speaking, in the time it takes Bitcoin to finalize a transaction, you can start 3,600 subnets on Avalanche. That's not bad, right? So are there that many coming? I assure you that many are coming. I'll talk about the pipeline in a second. So Avalanche subnets are just starting. I was getting a lot of pushback on Avalanche fees, and now the fees are down. You're going to hear a lot of people talk about, not a lot, you're going to hear some people who are a little clueless perhaps, talk about, ooh, Avalanche network revenue is dropping. Yes, it's by design. Just bear with it. I told you multiple times what we were going to do, and I faced a lot of opposition from crypto Twitter, and then we did the things we said we would do, and we got the results we said we would get. We reduced the fees multiple times. I told you we would horizontally scale, and now I showed you with DeFi Kingdoms, with Krabada, exactly how to do this, and the C-chain fees came down. So we're going to keep on doing this, and there are many, many subnets that are about to come. And this is Excelavox. He is showing the speed with which he is issuing. He's creating his own blockchain. I can just kind of mumble here for about 42 seconds, and you're going to see that he's about to get his chain. Okay, he got chain ID 69. I think he's done. Is he done? No, he's not done yet. He created the subnet. I think he has to deploy some validators. Yeah, okay, good. I think he's typing a little slow. If he typed a little faster, he could get it down below 42 seconds. And so now his validators are coming up. And there it is. We're back to he just issued he just created his own, essentially a layer 2 type scaling solution, a horizontal scaling solution, except it's much better than the layer 2. So so this is what the command line interface allows us to do. Oh, and here is a swag. Swag's doing it in under 32 seconds. I'm not gonna. Shall I mumble through this one? He too seems to be running a little slowly. Oh, I see. He's typing ahead. He pressed tab there. So when that first command comes back, he is going to create this other subnet. What's his chain ID 22? Okay, good. All right. So he created his. Okay, he's going to deploy. He's typing a little faster. I think that's where he got the extra 11 seconds. So we can start these things faster than other people can finalize transactions, and it's wonderful to be in this situation. So oh, and then this fellow, this is wonderful. He's on a ferry boat in Istanbul, it looks like, and that's what this is indicating to me. And is crossing from Europe to Asia, or Asia to Europe. I'm not sure which way, and or maybe Europe to Europe. This looks like Europe to Europe, and he's starting his own chain. So look, you can start your own subnet. The nice thing about subnets is they're shared nothing. So you start a subnet, and well, that's not true actually. They do share a bunch of things, but subnets inherently introduce, or have the ability to introduce, new nodes into the system that do not share resources with other subnets. So as a result, your performance on whatever subnet you create is completely isolated from the performance of the rest of the subnets and the rest of the system. So that's a really nice situation to be in the sense that you're isolated. Your fees are isolated, your performance is isolated, and now you can thus scale. It's easy as that. It's a pretty nice thing to have. So that's one of the reasons, many reasons, why gaming is beginning to take off on Avalanche. We had 2 already. We're going to have more coming in. And there's a very nice write-up from John that talks about why crypto gaming is one of the next steps in mainstream crypto adoption. You all saw what happened with DeFi. You all saw what happened with NFTs. NFTs are commonplace now. Every creative I run into, I was just at an art fair an art show last Saturday in Brooklyn. And almost every artist not only has their designs, but also corresponding NFTs. So you saw what happened. In a similar fashion, we're going to see games come in. And games are going to come in starting with the easier games first. 2D games are much easier. You can build one in 3 to 4 months, starting with a professional team, and make it look good. 3D games typically take, for most studios, it takes a 2 to 4 year commitment to get a good 3D game out. So those are coming as well. So we're going to see them launch. All of them, absolutely all of them, need performance isolation. So when someone's saying blah, 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 all this, that, and the other, it's like, they have, nobody else other than Avalanche has the design that we do. They all end up forcing their subnet equivalents to share resources. And therefore, their performance is just intertwined. And if one chain were to become heavily used, it would impact the bandwidth, the CPU, the disk available to the other subnet equivalents on their system, whether they're zones or parachains or whatnot, whatever they might be. So very different on Avalanche. We give you the full spectrum of available options with our architecture. It's a much broader architecture. It accommodates many more designs, many more ways of building systems than others, and guarantees that your system, or that operates on your subnet, is going to be performance isolated. So this is a long thread. I think this thread ends up going into I don't think it's not copied here. It goes into all the systems, all the games in the pipeline, and how many games are there in the pipeline? I had no idea. I knew we had a deep pipeline, but it was through that tweet storm or tweet thread, whatever, that I discovered exactly how many things we had cooking up on top of Avalanche. It's approximately 30 or so. And so that's just speaking right now. And every day there's more people coming to us. So it's fantastic to be in this position. So you're hearing it all here. Do with this alpha what you may. And it's just, we're in a good situation no matter what might be happening in the markets. Final issue is value accrual. I'm not going to say much about value accrual, but there's a very good blog post from Fox about how Avalanche will accrue value as it scales. And I think I discussed this last week. I mentioned it a little bit today already. Let me repeat it. So there's such a thing as network revenue. People track this thing. And some people think we're a 3-chain system. We are not a 3-chain system. Avalanche is a multi-chain system. So the future is multi-chain, and they're all going to be subnets on Avalanche. So let me say that again. So we are not just the P, the X, and the C chains. Yes, they're important. Yes, they were launched on day 0. They were there. They've always been there. But there are many other subnets on top of Avalanche. There'll be many, many, many others. How many? Infinitely many. How many can we support? Infinitely many. Compare that to other designs where they are doing auctions for things that are subnet equivalent. And I don't know why they're only limited to 100 or 200 of them. And I don't know why they're auctioning this stuff. It's not like it's a limited commodity. We can spin up one. You saw the guy spin it up on the state ferry from one side of Istanbul to the other side of Istanbul. And he did it within a minute or so. So you can just create these things the same way you can create a local area network. It's virtual, so you can do it from your laptop. You don't have to wire. You don't have to string the wire like we used to in the good old days. So what happens when you do this? It reduces the burn on the C chain. It reduces the burn on the X and the whatever is happening. It actually increases some of the activity on the P chain, but there's plenty of capacity there. And when you create it, it creates one transaction there. So that's what's going on here. And so you're going to see the revenue on the C chain drop as nodes migrate away from the C, not nodes, as dApps migrate away from the C chain, where they are competing for resources with everybody else on Earth, to their own subnets. That's going to happen, and that's going to be a wonderful thing for all of us. DeFi costs go down. DeFi starts offering more attractive prices. A whole lot of good things start happening, and people can have access to DeFi without paying an arm and a leg. You don't have to pay hundreds of dollars to get access to an AMM, to get access to a lending service, and so on. So we have a coherent vision on Avalanche, and we have a coherent method of achieving that vision. By now, we have I forget how long, 1.5 years, I guess, of a track record of delivering results. And, in a bear market, we just, it's inherent, I think, in crypto Twitter that people get into these arguments and so forth. And, just bear in mind that there's a difference between the faces behind those arguments. Some of them are actual architects who have a track record of delivering. Others are speaking from a point of dogma. They're not backing their assumptions with scientific reasoning, and so you're going to see a whole lot of back and forth on this one. That's about it. I think it's sort of all for what's on the top of my mind for this week. It's a fantastic time. I've been playing with a lot of new software. Really, really excited about what is to come. I've been looking at some new demos from both teams within Ava Labs and also external teams, actually. And I've been talking to a bunch of people who are finding that the bear market is a great time to build their own blockchain solutions. And some of those involve large enterprises. So it's a fun time. As I said, I think a few weeks ago, I love bear markets. It's a great time to focus. In a bull market, everybody's selling coins and hyping their stuff. And there's so much speculative money that it's all, everybody goes up and you don't know who's going up for what reason and, whatever it is. But in the bear market, it's different. So now we're going to see who really has the goods, who really can deliver, who really can stick to a timeline, and who is playing this game of constantly putting the, just essentially coming up with reasons to not deliver. As I said, if you believe that there is going to be a blockchain space, if you believe that this is going to replace finance as we know it, if you believe that behind every bank there will be a rail that is connected to a virtual network. If you believe that insurance companies will be restructured such that their entire financial operation is crowdsourced and they only have just essentially front ends for assessing damages and so forth. And I can go on like this for every sector. If you believe that we're going to reimagine the world based on a blockchain, that we're going to make it transparent, we're going to allow everybody to see what's happening, we're going to allow the fabric to put in rules so that those rules can never be circumvented, rules that we don't have to trust humans for, rules that we don't have to inspect institutions for, rules for which we don't need enforcement actions, but rules that just are built into the fabric that all provide us fair access to money, fair access to valuable resources, fair access to digital assets, fair access to everything digital. Then you have to go with the chains that are delivering that future to you. I know that especially in crypto Twitter, especially in a bear market, there's a propensity to go for the people who are selling you the best dreams. And the best dreams come with a lot of verbiage. I too know how to invent a crap ton of fancy verbiage, fancy terms for things that I know the proper name for. We have proper names for quite a lot of things in distributed systems. I don't have to invent these names. I use the proper name. But there are teams out there constantly inventing new names, constantly giving you shiny objects, constantly changing the shiny object to seek after, and constantly changing a vision and therefore finding a reason to not deliver. And then there are teams that are actually delivering. So I hope you'll stay with us. I hope you're going to enjoy the process as much as I do, because it's so fun to be building at a time when a lot of people are talking. And I hope some of the talk has been useful. I hope I've clarified how we think about this. It's very, very straightforward and very clear-minded. There are properties that you want, and they are a very large set of properties. And the types of systems that we have been building are those that achieve those properties with the most elegant, simple set of constructs possible. So I'm going to stop here. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I'm planning a fun trip this weekend and with family, so it's going to be nice. And I ended up also going to a very fun show yesterday. I ended up going to Sleep No More in New York City. If you're ever in New York City, you have to go. It is an absolute blast. I hope everybody gets to see it. It's an immersive theater experience that I thought was fascinating and eye-opening. So I hope you all enjoy your day. I hope you enjoy your weekend, and I'll be back with you a week from now. Take care.